And we are live with another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. And this time it is with Sharif El Mekki. It's another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. But hopefully you're freer after an hour of spending time with us this morning. Sharif El Mekki, my brother, how you doing?
Good. Good morning, man. Good morning. Good to see you. Happy Friday to you.
You know, I think that's why this show is always so much fun, is because it's Friday. I thought it was just that it was fun between us.
It'd be different if you took Saturdays off. You still working, so how does Friday really play into it? For some folks, it's like Friday is the gateway to my weekend. I'm doing this and that. Yes, we do it with a little more flexibility, but we're still grinding out here in these streets.
That's true. On it's not like Saturdays and Sundays. It's what it used to be for me a long time ago, where it was like my days to just I'm off. I'm off. I'm never off anymore.
In that tradition, the reward for good work is more work.
Work. I've heard you say that before, and I'm like, well, maybe I should start doing some mediocre work.
Mediocre.
Maybe I should just do some mediocre work, because I don't know if I want more work. Listen, today we are going to talk about an old, tried and true topic within the education community and within the nation's education commentary, which is the school to prison pipeline. I had, for a while, had started saying, the school to prison pipeline is a little bit farcical in my mind, because it's become the school prison nexus for me, as if they are like exactly attached and connected. There is no longer a two. It's not like there's an on-ramp. The two are a continuum of the same thing, meaning when I call some schools starter prisons, there's some schools you can walk in and you have to get frisked before you go in, and they have metal detectors, and they have stormtroopers walking the halls looking very much like they are not there for education, but looking like they're there to police young people. So when you enter that building, it's not like what many people in America remember about schools, which is a very educationally therapeutic environment with very soft rules of engagement, but a lot of magic. It's a place of learning and play and expression and creativity. And no, for many schools, that's not what you get when you walk in. You know, what's in your book bag? Empty your pockets. Let me frisk you. Let me, rouse you. Blah, blah, blah. It's like stop and frisk, the educational version.
Every morning. Right? Good morning. Here's a breakfast bar and pad you down at the same time.
Pad you down. Pop up, pop. Lift up your arms. Hands up, don't shoot. It should be for protest, but it shouldn't be for a greeting in the morning. But this gets me to talking about the school to prison pipeline, which is something that we have talked about before, but we want to flip it on its head for this discussion. We don't want to just keep talking about the problem over and over and over again. We do want to have a shared understanding of what it is, and then bypass the problem or get beyond it. And we want to create a school to freedom pipeline. For me personally, I believe that as a libertarian, I believe that we should be free people, that we shouldn't have to worry about our government. Our government should have to worry about us, that we should that our government should have the consent of the governed, and that we as citizens should uphold a lot of power. We should have a lot of power. So when we deal with state agents like police officers, like teachers, like judges, like others, they should see themselves as in service of us, not us as in service of them, or us being their subjects. That is what freedom means to me in terms of an American context, United States context. Mm-hmm. So if we want to set young people up for that existence, where they walk the streets as free people, where they have they have protection from unreasonable search and seizures, where they are safe within their person so long as they are not suspected of committing a crime. These things that are just in some ways considered to be no-brainers for white people, I want our kids to be on path for those freedoms. So here's the quick setup. School to prison pipeline, as defined by ThoughtCo and others, is a process through which students are pushed out of schools and into prisons. In other words, it is a process of criminalizing youth that is carried out through disciplinary policies and practices within schools that put students in contact with law enforcement. We know that the earlier contact with law enforcement greatly increases the chances that young people will have contact with the criminal justice system. We also know that disciplinary practices that are overly harsh and overly targeted at Black behavior and Black behavior management result in more young people not graduating from high school, many more graduating from high school without all the skills that they need to go on to college, and a great increase in the likelihood that they will, within their lifetime, engage with the criminal justice system. The numbers are as high as 1 in 3 Black males in their lifetime will be in contact with the criminal justice system. If you're a teacher and you know you're an educator and you're in a system of education and you know that this is the problem, this is a problem with Black people that are before you, I think you have a right, or not a right, you have a duty
yeah,
to address that, to dismantle that. So the last thing that I'll say about this, and then we can jump right in to set this up, is there is a teacher residency program in Seattle that I read about in prep for this discussion this morning. And they actually, as part of their residency, visit the prisons, and they have a Black prisoners caucus that actually helps teachers understand the issues that they had as young people with their schools, and specifically with teaching and with teachers. And that relationship, I think, offers us a glimpse into what might be the solution for creating a 360 understanding circle between community, educators, parents, students, and leaders and thought leaders. So there you go. Let's jump in. Sharif El-Mekki, how's that as a framing?
No, I think it's a fantastic framing and extremely relevant, and I love this whole idea of one, the context of, we don't even need the joining two between school prison, because just too many opportunities, for law enforcement, to be involved with children super early. Like we've all seen, we know about the murders, but, like the one thing about, when people are murdered, it sometimes masks, because that's so jarring, it masks all the other things, the assaults, the harassments, the arrests, like that number is astronomical. And you can go, as we've all saw, whether it was a child in the police car that had a mental health, or kids getting slammed inside of school, like all that kind of stuff happens. Ed Trust did this story a while ago that more kids have police officers instead of counselors in their school. Like 8 million have no like counselors, like they no access to counselors to support them in various various ways. And I think that I would love to read more about the piece you read about in Seattle, because I think that's an important part of teacher prep programs, is not just in your last semester in college, your second semester, your senior year, doing some student teaching. Your involvement should be pervasive throughout your educator prep programming, and you should be engaging in the communities in various spaces, Boys and Girls Club, the local library, the shelters, the rec centers, in homes and with community, like all the things, and not just the things that are going negative, but just everything. Like you should just be involved and not looked at as disjointed as part of your, part of your training. And so I think that something like this, whether it's, any educator prep program should be involved in touching multiple points that impact the community to have a better understanding. I know I was a better teacher because I was a social worker first. First, I was in pre-law because that was the route to become a lawyer. So that was that one perspective. And then being a social worker, doing home visits, helping a child get, different needs met, because of all the different pressure points that I saw society built, that was helpful. So I think something like that is absolutely, any educator prep program should be thinking in these terms. Now, it doesn't mean like, oh, just go to prison. And you got to have the right professors to even teach this, right? Because you can just advance pathology if you got the wrong mindset about it. And so it really needs to be deliberate and thoughtful, and also asset-based, right? Like, don't just do it all and like, oh, yeah, here's the prison. Now we're going back to it. It ain't a scared straight program for future educators. It's supposed to give context about all of the institutions that are trying to crush that were designed basically to undermine and crush communities of color, particularly Black communities.
So I have up on the screen the end of the pipeline. Seattle teachers go to prison to get schooled. And this is about that residency program that I was talking about. There's a piece in here that I thought was really interesting. It was just a quote in here, and I'll read it. It says, a baby-faced inmate named Tony said, as a Black boy, doing the right thing wasn't always enough, and school staff could misconstrue his intent. He recalled almost getting into a fight, but walking away instead. He went to the principal's office, visibly upset. The vice principal had security in there, and she threatened me, he said. She said to get that look off of my face before I end up on the ground, he said. Tony said he was arrested for intimidating a school official and expelled, right? So this is a guy in prison who's talking to teachers, telling them, relating a situation. Now, what we know about this as a nugget of truth is that there is research that basically says that teachers misread Black faces as anger, even when they're not. And we don't have a good tally, a good number on the number of times that Black children are children, they're kids, engaging in something like Tony just said. I got into this fight, but I decided to walk away. I was going to do the right thing and blah, blah, blah. And he thinks he's like any other kid, but he goes to the office. And in Seattle, I mean, I'm just going to be real with you. There are very few Black educators in Seattle. So I'm imagining that in his school that he's facing very white authority figures within school. But he's thinking he's doing the right thing and he gets punished for it. That creates a cycle. That's a problem.
Yeah. And language is so important. I remember an educator and how I had to like really, push her because she used that language of, oh, the child is trying to bully me. Right. And then I was just like, that can be such a problematic statement. It can cause so much harm. Like, yes, in this school, yeah, we're like, that's not what's happening. Right. But I was like, but you may not always be in this school. Right. Like you may be other places, and using that kind of language to describe, 12-year-old Black children, Black girls is extremely problematic and leads to dire consequences for child, not adult. And so I think that piece is, absolutely crucial. And then when you say like how he described it, well, you made the point of, body language and the facial expressions is often misconstrued. I think sometimes, that's, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a chart that gets around. It's usually for children to be able to see all the different words you can use and emotions. Like it may have happy, sad, but it goes deeper than that, like frustrated or, worry, right? Like it's trying to help students have all of this language. And I just wonder, like, when we talk about SEL, social emotional learning for children, everything's child facing. It's all of this stuff really needs to be adult facing. Adults need social emotional learning. Adults need that chart so they can actually say, oh, the child's not trying to intimidate me. The child is worried or frustrated. The child feels in peril. Like there are other ways instead of just, how did I use what you're describing or how you feel as a weapon against you? Like, that's crazy. Like, what an experience for a child.
I want to put this up real quick here along the same lines of what we're talking about right now. So when I mentioned the research, so this is research from the APA policy or psycho articles policy articles. It's called Racialized Emotion Recognition Accuracy and Anger Bias of Children's Faces. I swear to God, if you educated people writing these things don't start coming up with better titles and realizing that you're talking to mere damn mortals, I am going to become a sniper. Stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. Right? I get it. You're educated. You're super educated. You got all kinds of education.
Look at my sophisticated wording of this title.
Racialized emotion recognition accuracy and anger bias of children's faces. You couldn't have said that more simply, but anyways, one of the things that I highlighted here, it says findings that adults demonstrate either less emotion accuracy and or greater anger bias for Black versus white children could potentially explain some of the large racialized disciplinary discrepancies in schools.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, let's come up with a new title, right? Like, interpreting a child's facial expression with a racist lens. Just let's make it plain and simple. Like being racist as you're, punishing kids for expressing. Yeah, don't be racist.
But this adds to, if we wanted to create a new pedagogy, but we wanted to start with teaching teachers what research says on many levels about their own behavior, whether it's singling you out or not, things like this particular study would only be one of many.
One of many, yeah.
There are many ways in which, you engage with students that are either biased, or unconsciously biased. They may be either explicitly or unconsciously. But do we have time for that? Is this something that can fit within teacher prep programs?
Oh, yes, man. There's so much wasted time, so many courses that have nothing to do with actually advancing, liberatory efforts of children. Nothing to do. Like if we're already saying teachers are coming out, and I've shown this, this chart many, many times because it's consistent. New teachers are saying they are not prepared to teach
when they come out of
teacher college. Yeah. So tens of thousands of dollars, at least 4 years, and we're not prepared to teach, right? Which is why you're there in the first place. Is why you're writing that check. We're taking out that loan. So that means that the coursework is misaligned to what needs to happen in a classroom. Something like that study, that is aligned, right? Because that's going to help you build relationships. That's going to help you check your own biases. That can be the basis of a professional development to continue, right? Whereas the pre-service, the training you get, development you get before you enter a K-12 school is connected to the in-service, the professional development you get after you get, there should be a linkage. You read this, your theory, you visited different places, you saw the impact of when children were pushed out because of dumb stuff like that. And now, okay, how does it apply as an intellectual doing emotional work? Yeah, you're doing all this anti-racist work or interrogating your bias. But most important is not just when you're happy and when you feel good and things are flowing. No, when you're frustrated. When you feel like, oh, you know what, my feelings are hurt. That's when you really check your bias, when your feelings are hurt. A kid does say something slick to you and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get you're intimidating me, you're bullying me, that kind of thing. And so that is an ongoing development, right? It's a continuum, and we shouldn't expect I'm in the promised land. I already got my badge of being culturally responsive because I attended X amount of workshops, or I led a workshop, or I was at the protest, or I got a Black Lives Matter button, flag, banner. Now I've arrived. No, you've never really arrived. You've never arrived. There is no arrival.
Bruh,
it is only work.
Amazon and I got my t-shirt. What is wrong with you? What are you not seeing?
I participate in Melanated Mondays and Woke Wednesdays, and every other cultural promotion that
Tamale Tuesdays.
Exactly.
Taco Tuesdays.
Exactly. I do all that. So I'm here. And you know what? But the sad part is how many educators I've spoken to over the years, 26 years and beyond. So 28 at this point. Say, well, I teach at a Black school, so I don't need that. Or, are we still talking about this, or do we need to do this again? Did we do this last year? we need to do this last half an hour, let alone a year ago. But to fix your lips to say that means that you're thinking even more, damning thoughts.
Want to add another piece of the evidence? Let's bring it up. So this is an article in the New York Times about the about Black girls specifically.
Under 6.
Adultification. Adultification means Black girls are punished more frequently, even when they're under 6, according to a report from the Department of Education Civil Rights Data Collection. From 2013 to 2014, only 20% of female preschoolers were Black, but Black girls made up 54% of female preschool children with 1 or more suspensions. Preschool, right? So it starts earlier than anybody else. And so we could talk about this many different ways about I'm sure I have in my head some conservative colleagues, I'll call them, who like to beat the drum around, but this is about the kids themselves. It's not about the system. So what they will say is basically, if you commit more crime, you will be charged with more criminal offenses. If you have more behavior infractions, you will be corrected more often than other people. The assumption being that this is because Black people and Black children have more infractions. Completely doesn't pay attention to the research that tells us that for the exact same infractions, the consequences are different. Mm-hmm. Meaning being loud in the hallway as a white boy is boys being boys. Being loud in the hallways as Black children is they need to be refined and corrected so that they could be respectable one day, right? Mm-hmm. Two very different outlooks. I'll give you one of my favorite examples. It's a horrible example, but it's not, it's one of the ones that I would like to bring up. Mm-hmm. The Stanford swimmer years ago who got brought up on rape charges because he found a highly inebriated girl or young woman on campus and raped her behind a garbage dumpster. In court, his dad said, "Why should he be punished for 10 minutes of fun?" Right?
No, stop. No.
This is what his dad said. Why should his whole life be ruined for 10 minutes of fun? And that dude got a slap on the wrist for raping and got busted while raping her, by the way, by a good Samaritan who was jogging or running by or something, saw it happening and actually intervened and did something about it or whatnot. I can give you so many stories like that. I'm using one of the worst stories and worst examples, but everything that we do that we're talking about today to Black children in terms of over-punishing, adultifying, seeing kids as less innocent, misreading their emotions, the opposite is actually true with white children, right? The exact opposite, like the babyfying or the giving the benefit of the doubt or the seeing them as kids being kids, but we just need to gently and softly help them do better, is, I'm contending, is the complete opposite for white children. When you have a system that has two totally different ways of approaching youth in the way that I just described, I don't know how you cannot believe that there's such thing as systemic racism.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, I agree with you, man. I've little patience for folks who don't want to see the very clear pattern, because they just refuse to, or they just want to say no, things are different. You can see the pattern. Study after study shows it. And it has a long history, right? We've all seen the early photos when enslavement was still happening or sharecropping, and how young children were with a bag over their shoulder, picking cotton or doing some other, labor intensive work as a child, where a white child was not expected to ever have to do that. It was supposed to be a privileged life versus, one of menial labor. And so we see that adultification, we see that punishment begins early when you are a Black child. Like that is just a part of the beginning. There's research that shows a Black child experiences their teacher's racial biases as early as 3 or 4 years old. 3 years old. And you know, as a parent and as an educator, you're like, you're like wrapping your head around a 3-year-old, but you see it, right? And that's why I'm also like, even in our own culture, why I, like shun it, like don't call our babies, little man, or, or he know better, like he's 3, like, what I mean? Or she should, all of that, because that also translate into school where the child becomes conditioned to hearing that type of language, and they can't necessarily as a youth discern the difference. And so when someone else is adultifying them, they're like, oh yeah, well, this is what happens. I am I'm the man, I'm little man, or like, no, like be very, very conscious of language and what we tell our children to be accustomed to. Right. And so that's extremely important.
What are some things that you have heard, being in the classroom or being in schools, that you feel contribute to this, that you actually saw or witnessed within educators?
Yeah, I mean, it's so many different things. I remember, and some like this has religion to do with. I remember an educator was like, well, that girl doesn't have her scarf on, so we need to make her bring a letter from her imam to say that she's Muslim. And I'm just like, that makes no sense. Like, why are you like, what are you talking about? I'm like, so, because she had her scarf on one day and didn't wear it another day. I'm like, that's none of your freaking business. I'm like, are you going to start telling all the Christian children to bring a letter from their pastor to wear their a cross or something like that? It makes no sense. Right. And so you just start seeing this othering, early on. I think the idea of, I gave the example of bullying, actually writing down a referral. These 3 students are trying to bully me. Like, you're a grown woman. Those are 12-year-olds. They ain't even thinking about bullying you. They rolled their eyes. So what? Like, keep it moving, right? Like this is, and it's okay. It's not like I've never addressed a child rolling their eyes. Like, hey, let's, we have a thing about, what does respect look like and things like that. But as far as like punishment versus a conversation, a disciplinary referral, for that is absolutely crazy. I've seen students who may not have necessarily had the language, but experience a, like a racist comment, like a teacher said something to the effect of, don't act like you're in the hood, or this ain't the hood, or something. And the child reacted to that. Right. And I'm just like, the child should have reacted to that. Like, you were saying something that was disrespectful, and the child didn't necessarily know exactly what to say, but they knew it was wrong and they responded. But the disciplinary referral was just about what the child said or did in response, which I didn't know. It wasn't like something crazy, but the child got smart, so to speak. Right. It responded like anybody would, and nothing about what happened prior was, in the conversation. And my first experience like this was actually in school. I didn't go to public school till 10th grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm walking, literally I had a pass to go to the bathroom, and in anticipation of getting to the bathroom, I put the pass in my pocket. I didn't know that was a thing not to do, had my book bag, had the pass. I just, was carrying my book bag, the pass. All of a sudden, I'm just walking, 14-year-old walking through the hallway. All of a sudden, I feel somebody like just grip me up. And initially I'm like, oh, this is one of my boys playing. It was a cop. It was a police officer.
Wow.
And I'm like, yo, and I didn't respond. Well, I don't even know how to say it. I didn't respond well to being manhandled by a police as I was just walking, right? Yeah. So I responded in a way that felt like, hey, I was being accosted. And I got, sent to the disciplinary office and all that kind of stuff, but it was just like, and then she found out that I had a pass. It was like, oh, well, it should have been out. Like, well, you making up rules as we go along? Like, now I got to have, like, come on, man. Like, no, you were looking for a reason to jump on me, and it could have went worse. It could have ended up with me, being expelled or something like that.
I think that white people overall, and this is going to be one of those generalized statements, but I think white society feels like they are all deputized to police blackness.
Oh yeah, that's history, right?
Yeah,
that's history.
Yeah, at all levels. So, in a way that they don't feel a right to police each other, right? So,
that's what should be happening. Picture that.
Right.
That.
They should be policing each other, but the default position is to narc. Like, so the woman in New York City who calls the police on the little black girl selling water on the street, for instance, who became the water Karen, the Karen who was the first Karen that became nationally famous.
Yeah, I didn't even hear about that one.
Yeah, so in New York, a little girl was selling cold water on a summer day on the side of the road in ways that, like, some of us have done lemonade stands. Some of our kids have done things like cookies or whatever. It's just
celebrated, right? In certain cultures, celebrated, right?
Absolutely. Like I'm sure that there's a Norman Rockwell painting somewhere of a lemonade stand. Like it's so historically American. But this black girl was selling water on the street. White woman approached, wanted to know if she had a permit to sell the water. And then she called the police. And the girl's mother followed her as she was calling the police and watched her, just filmed her calling the police. And it was almost like, whoever joked that 911 has become customer service for white people is like really onto something, because I can show you many other instances like that. It was the black girl with the water. There was a black boy who was selling candy outside of a grocery store. White woman approached and just went off on him and made him out to be every kind of beggar and this and that and the other. And, a Latino man, showed up and intervened and bought all the kids candy and like gave her a hard time about it. It was like, get away from him, that type of thing, which is what you should do. Like, just for people, that's what good looks like.
Policing each other. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Well, this is a Latino dude basically intervening on behalf of a black kid,
Great.
But there's so many of these over policing stories. I'm going to call the police on you, or I'll call the cops, or you need to get off my lawn, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, to where I don't know how we can make sure that we purify people that are going to be dealing with our children every day of something that seems so ingrained in the society.
Yeah, man.
Right.
And it's and as you're talking about this, I might have to, go to a counselor or something, because I'm feeling all these emotions, because I'm literally remembering all the different things, right? And this is just some, like, and I've had so many negative experiences with this type of thing. One of the other things I talked about, my 10th grade experience, my 12th grade experience. One of them was we were actually going to the beach. We had won the track championships for the city. We were really good. We're going to the beach. We're driving, to Jersey, and all of a sudden the police pulled us over. And I'm like, what's this about? This joker comes to the window and says, the woman, there was another car that ended up like pulling, we pulled over. My man Greg was driving. We saw there was a police car. Then behind the police car, didn't notice at first, there was another car that pulled over. The police says, yeah, the woman there called us and said that you cut her off on the road. And we're like, what are you talking about? She called the police and said, yeah, these whatever got them. So I can imagine she said something about black kids in a car. And he pulled us over. And you know what he said? He's like, I'll let you go if you go apologize. And I was like, F that, don't apologize. And my man was like, listen, we're trying to, and this feeds into what we always have to do, right? All this balancing. I'm just like, F it, let the whole trip be over. We're supposed to stay the weekend out in Wildwood. And I was like, F it, I don't care. I'm so incensed, I can't even enjoy myself. My friend was like, listen, we spent money. Like, we already purchased our, the down deposit. We don't have money just to throw away. We got this car, we got the place we rented, all of that. Let me just go apologize and make it go away. He said it's going to be over. He had to get out of the car, walk over to her. Like, a cop didn't witness or any of this. It was after a phone call to them to say these teenagers did this, did X, Y, Z. They come to stop us, makes him apologize, and then we were free to go. Like, that level of, and I remember in 11th grade, like, being threatened to 69th Street. We were going shopping for something for school. We had taken our school pictures. We used to take them, 69th Street was where the place was. I had to borrow a tie, you know what I mean, from my man Tyrone. And literally he said, I jaywalked or something. And he said, if you don't go back across the street, I'm gonna lock you up. And at first I was like, well, lock me up, right? My friends were like, no, come on, man. Like, no, let's just make it go away. Da, 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 da. So I did, but I was incensed, right? And I just think about all the times, like I was incensed, like furious, and just, it was nowhere to go. It just like sat, right? So, and then how many times does this happen for our children where they just over and over and over again, they have to like swallow poison, swallow hot coal, right? And just deal with it. And I think that's why the mental health is so important for our youth, because we can't just wait till they're adults. We have to find ways. We have to assume that they've experienced racial aggression and help them deal with it, right? Like all this, like, no, I don't think it happens, or no, like, I'm surprised, when we had these parents who are like, what, I had no idea my child experienced it. Assume they are experiencing it and build the safety net based on that. Build your ecosystem based on, they're going to experience it. I don't
think that, even parents who've been through things themselves, I don't think always see what their kids are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even share that with I'm trying to think. Besides the, when the cop grabbed me, like that had to be shared, because that ended up being but the other two, I don't even think I ever shared it with my family. Like it was just like
no, I mean,
growing up black in America, right? Like
right. There's so many secrets that you have, right? Like in the black mind, you carry these things that why share them? Because in some ways you feel like it's the norm.
And I'm like, what are they going to do? Like it's systemic, right? Like I'm like, what are they going to complain to the 69th, the Upper Darby Police station? What are they going to do? They're going to be like, maybe they'll take a note. Maybe they're like, yeah, whatever, lady. You know what I mean? So just like, I'm not even going to put my parent through the stress of dealing with the situation that I dealt with as a child, right? Like, because I'm even trying to protect my parent. So as a child, as a student, how often do we try to protect our parents from the oppression that we experience because we don't, some like, oh, I didn't want my mom to act crazy. But sometimes like it is just of a righteous anger is an important thing to have and wield when the times call for it.
Yeah, except for when it'll get you killed. Right. Like, and that's here. So here's the thing that I'm thinking about as we talk about schools. So you have I talk often about white teachers being female, and black students I often talk about in terms of black boys. It's only because I can't think of a more asynchronous example of a relationship in terms of historical fodder than a white woman and a black male and power, like a power dynamic. So when you talk about a power dynamic, many black men have been lynched because of white women and white women tears and white women accusations and the preservation of the white woman as the kind of the peak femininity and the peak kind of asset of whiteness itself, right?
Which is a crazy dynamic when you think about the misogyny that's also embedded that takes, right? Like it's crazy.
Well, I mean,
it's the peak, and they're it's the peak for everybody else, right?
Let's be clear about it. The white woman doesn't own that as an asset. She is an asset of white patriarchal supremacy. Yeah. So she is conjured by the white male imagination on purpose as a property, as a thing.
Yeah.
And the blackness is a constant threat of dilution to that supremacy, right? Now, I know we're getting a little bit philosophical here, but I'm just saying this is at the point that you have a black male child, for instance, and not like me, but a visibly, for sure, unmistakably black, historically descendant of American enslaved people, black child, and a white female person. The moment that they come into contact with each other, there's a pre-existing tension that existed before either of them was born, right? And if we don't acknowledge the relationships and the interactions that take place between people, then we're not being intelligent people ourselves. We're not like being intelligent and pulling things apart and thinking things through intelligently. So when we talk about tension and frustration, a black child might carry into a school a very specific set of tensions that may be firsthand experienced by that child, but also might be residual from generations that are raising that child and that existed before that child was even born. So you have a entire history walking into the classroom. And on the other side, you have a white teacher who has been been steeped in a very opposite history of that child. So when it comes to someone getting frustrated, and one has power over the other, the teacher might be frustrated and the student might be frustrated, but only one of them has power, right, to act on their frustration. Only one can act on their frustration. So one is going to be increasingly more frustrated over time because they have no power in the situation to release their frustration and see resolution for it. And the other is going to have a constant ability to have some form of resolution for their frustration. Again, I know I'm being very philosophical here, but let me just share something, to me that, it's a story that some of you have probably seen. You've probably seen it, Sharif, but I'm going to put it up again. I think maybe we did
I'm
talk
hearing
about
a whole lot of stories today I had not heard of before.
So this is a video of a teacher in Baltimore public schools yelling to students, "Do you want to be a punk ass nigger who's going to get shot?" You have to ask yourself, what took place between the frustration and the tension between the young Black people who are in the care of a white teacher who is screaming in an urban school setting, "Do you want to be a punk ass nigger who's going to get shot?" Right? Someone for me needs to deconstruct that, and don't do it with the lens of that's a one-off. That's just a bad actor. That's just one bad actor acting out. I'll give you another example. What did you say?
Where there's smoke, there's fire. And when
there's smoke, there's fire. I'm going to pull another one up real quick here. So Arkansas teacher accused of making a 5-year-old clean feces out of the toilet with his hands, a 5-year-old, right? What level of frustration do you need to have lost control of to make a 5-year-old child, who you probably don't see as a real child? You don't see them as like you
don't see them as precious, right? Like as precious,
Well, I'm
as a
certain
human
you're not
being,
making a little white girl dig crap out of the toilet. I'm certain you're not making, even if you wanted to teach her a lesson about using too much toilet paper, I am sure, white woman teacher, you're not making white girl dig crap out of a toilet with her hands, right? What aren't we omitting here, Sharif? When we start, we see these stories. I could keep going. This is like, I don't want to, because I really want to get past people saying that these are one-offs. These aren't like endemic. No, they are endemic. I could keep going all day long with these stories. But I'm looking for the part in which teachers start admitting this is in me. This is a possibility. And what can I do to change?
Yeah. We're this School District of Philadelphia had, they're working on, like redesigning a lot of things, and this comes up a lot, in the conversations and in the working group. Most recently watched a video where it talked about, and I forget the woman. I wish I'll post it in the chat after this show. But this woman was speaking about, how it's such a pervasive issue in society. And, we can't imagine that schools some kind of way. It's like we're in a cartoon. Like, people want us to be in a cartoon, and there's a force field outside of all the schools. We could say like society is one way. When I was young, we used to watch Super Friends, right? And then Super Friends, they would have a beam, and they tried to get the folks, and it was a force field protecting them. Or the Wonder Twins would blast their hands together, make this force field. Like schools don't have force fields to protect them from everything else. And sometimes it's not just protection. Sometimes it's places of fostering this stuff. It emanates from within the school building. And so, this whole notion that that it's doesn't happen, or it's a one-off, or it's just one particular bad actor. Like, no, it's a societal issue. Schools are part of society. You know, Angela Davis said something to the effect of school, or Asada, sorry. Mama Asada said, you know, schools are created in the, you know, in the make of the societies that produce them. Like, they will reflect societies that produce them, right? And that's why it is so important, you know, where our children grow. And this is why, you know, this Sunday on 8 Black Hands, we'll talk about like what are the schools that we should be creating for our children? Like what should keep them safe? What is the dynamic where, and we're talking about safety, we're not just talking about the physical safety where I'm not getting accosted or, you know, slammed and all this kind of stuff, but intellectual, culturally, emotionally safe, right? Because all of the forms of violence, even constantly saying like your people, whether directly or indirectly, your people have never contributed to anything, is violence upon violence upon violence upon the psyche of our children. And how are we talk about like, oh yeah, you're going to be a productive member of society? How
how Sway?
Yeah,
how
like,
Sway?
I mean, yeah, bro. I'm gonna definitely need some peppermint tea after this show, bro. Like, it's a walk in the park, something.
What I want to keep with the theme with is, like, I've been in this conversation talking a lot about the problem, and it's only because I don't think that people will admit that there's a problem to the extent that it is. And I think everybody will say the same thing. Well, my mom's a teacher, my aunt's a teacher, my uncle's a principal, my uncle's a teacher, my blah, blah, blah. And they'll pull that on you. And
they want to show you the one that's not, but not talk about the system that
they don't even know that. They don't even know if their parents not one of them.
They know.
Right? Yeah. I'm sure that the cop that beat your ass, if you're like somebody got your ass beat by a cop last week, I'm sure his kids are right. Yeah, I'm sure somebody's walking around saying, my dad's one of the good ones, right? Like, and your dad might be like one of the dirtiest ones of all. Your mom might be the biggest damn racist that ever existed, and you don't even know it because that's your mom, and nobody's gonna walk around and be like, you know, my mom's pretty goddamn racist, right? Like, you know, so
he might have been the one that pulled us over, right? And
could have pulled you over. Could be the one that 30 years has been anti-black towards students in their classroom year after year after year with the new group of kids in their classroom. And the benefit of the doubt on the one side is so powerful that it kind of like just evaporates the benefit of the doubt on the black side, the side of the black child. You know, no, man, maybe you somehow deserved to be lifted off the ground and slammed onto the ground so hard to where you passed out as a student. Like we saw recently.
Yeah, what happened before they started recording?
Before they started that, because something has to explain the fact that you got picked up off the ground by a man who's 100 and something pounds bigger than you and slammed to the ground so hard that you had a concussion and you went lights out. Something has to explain that beyond just, and you know, there's a sense of like, I don't like black women attitudes. I don't like black girl attitudes. I don't like black male swag or the way that they walk or they talk. So I'm not going to like black kids. That I don't care who you are. You carry some of that with you into the classroom. And I just want to be very clear for people listening and watching that research is on my side when I say it's not just white educators that will carry that with them. We have some Negropeans who actually carry that same thing into the schools with them and whatnot, have internalized racism so greatly and have internalized white supremacy so thoroughly that they themselves cannot be trusted 100% to not be actors in the same possible way. So I just want to be very clear.
That back door Joe and Carter G. Woodson talked about, right? Like, you ain't even got to build a back door. They'll build it themselves, right?
They'll build it for themselves. Here's a transition I want to make. So we've been talking about the school to prison pipeline and some of the parts of it, but I think that the discussion should start moving towards a school to freedom pipeline. We should start engaging parents and students around freedom and start drawing a picture of what freedom will look like. I started this show by saying my goal is to make sure that we are raising free people who are secure in their privacy and their protections. They live in a country that is governed by the consent of the governed, and they are part of the ones that need to give the consent, and that they are not stop and frisked, because until they are suspected of a crime, they are free people and not to be detained by any agent, deputized or not, within the white supremacist structure. So our goal should be to raise free people, right? So we need a school to freedom pipeline that's going to require people within the current system of oppression to do one or two things: double cross that system and become freedom teachers, or to submit their resignation, or to say to themselves, I'm going to be complicit. You only have three choices. You only have three choices in the current system. Because number one, yes, it is a system of oppression. So you need to either one, admit I'm complicit, or two, I'm in here, but I'm going to double cross it and I'm going to make a difference, or three, maybe I'm not the one to even be here.
Yeah.
Maybe if the only way that I can do my job is to scream at Black children at some point, do you want to be a bunch of punk ass niggas that are going to get shot, as this woman did in Baltimore? She should have quit the day before that came out her mouth. She should have said to herself, self, I don't want to be that person. So let me just go ahead and give up this job. So there's two things that I think, Sharif, like your work is in one of them, pedagogy. Like I've been saying, we need a pedagogy of justice. At least that's what I said to you today before. Pedagogy of justice would be informed by history, sociology, and reality. Each educator would be explicitly anti-poverty, anti-incarceration, and anti-prison instead of just being anti-racist, which is to me too vague. You need to explicitly be, I'm not going to be a guardian who transports people from kindergarten to jail. I'm not going to participate in that system. I'm explicitly anti-prison. And the third one is you need to be explicitly pro-freedom and pro-restoration of Black people. That's pedagogy, but here's my long-winded way of getting to where I wanted to go, which is we also need the thing that I have recently seen as more important, which is andragogy, which is pedagogy is about what you teach kids, right?
Stuart.
Right?
Tell them about this adult learning. Go ahead, bro. Yeah, Stuart. Yo, you are tuned into Unpublic. So, no, bro, go ahead. Yeah. That's what's up.
So, I mean, when we talk about pedagogy, PETA definitely very specifically deals with children, how and what we teach children and methodology around teaching children. But the real kind of work that needs to take place alongside that is what we teach adults. And andragogy is about what and how we teach adults. So adult education and what we teach parents and what we teach community members and teachers and educators and officers and everybody else is equally as important, but we're missing the boat on it, right? What are we teaching parents and other adults in the lives of children about being pro-freedom, about the home to school relationship, about the parent to educator relationship, about the student to educator relationship? Those are all relationships that make for healthy children. And in every one of those areas, I think we're falling short. I think parents participate in the school to prison pipeline, right? Everything that we have said about teachers, we can also say about some parents who feel like I'm going to punish you before they punish you. I'm going to punish you even harder because I know one day they might be punishing you and I want you to be prepared for it or whatnot, which is actually a bad approach, right?
Stop beating your kids. Stop it.
Stop internalizing the master and fulfilling the master's duty as if you're a remotely controlled parent in the lives of the kids, because now you're doing the same thing and you have to be accountable too for the part and the role that you play of not being a freedom advocate for your child, but being an extension of the system.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is a whole nother show, about, whipping on kids, and I know we've spoken about it, before, but I think, I often think about like how many times, at least when I witness it, was it really out of just deep frustration, and, because the system, you feel so crushed in so many different ways. And so then it's like, lashing out at a child. And I think it's something that's really worthy of, deeper discussion in our communities about like where it comes from, why is it persisting, and what does it mean? Beyond the fact that, they telling us that we can't beat our kid, like forget what the white people or what forget all of that. Let's talk about what will help Black children reach their highest potential. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too often it's like, oh, the system's saying this, or or misinterpreting a Bible or Quran, Islamic tradition, Christian or Judeo tradition. So I think that's a much deeper conversation that I do think we should have one day. When you talk about like just the work, the andragogy and the work, because it goes back to mindset. And the mindset cannot be something that you just say, I have it. Oh, I got the right mindset. When Dr. Tatum talks about everyone is constantly breathing in the smog of racism, it is, and we talked about this before. I said it was like secondhand smoke. You're like, nah, it's firsthand smoke. And you're right. Like it is firsthand smoke that everyone breathes in, including the people that internalize it and then use it, weaponize it against our own people. Right. So all of this is absolutely important. And I think when I think about like the freedom, I love the framing of school to freedom, Chris, because as a principal and as a educator, what we used to talk about a lot was, what does the school to activism pipeline look like? How do you build and destroy, right? Because a lot of people are like, I'm anti this and I don't want to do this, I want to do that, but not really talking about what they should do, what we can do, what we can. And when we're talking about imagine, we're not talking about some like pie in the sky. We're talking about, what can I imagine for tomorrow? What can I imagine for next period? Right. And really doing the hard work of designing something that looks radically different. And so what does it take for a child to be an activist? And we're not talking about like, oh, they're activists because they're at every protest that gets organized. No, how are they activists within their own lives, charting their own course, deciding what they want to do, having that, as Dr. Cole talks about, that agentic mindset and behavior. How do you become an activist in that? Because the first activist you have to be is for yourself and for your family. That's the first form of activism, right? Like if you are resisting the messages that you are less than and worthless, then that is a form of activism. That means you are like active, you are conscious. You talking about keep your head on the swivel. The first thing, keep your head on the swivel, is about the messages that you get about you and your people.
I love that. As a place to land, I love that. School to activism, starting with yourself, but definitely with your children. I've said it often that with my kids, I feel like I'm loose and strict at the same time because I'm trying to raise free people, right? Like I'm literally trying to raise free people, even free of me and so I'm really in a lot of ways attempting not to be an assistant to the retributive society, the society that says retribution is actually the gospel, right? The gospel of virtue. Oh, you made a mistake. Let me punish you. Let me punish you into oblivion. In this case that, what we've talked about today, we should all take a freedom orientation. Yes, it is important that we teach kids to read and write, but the reason that we are so crazed about reading and writing and math is because we think it leads to freedom. It's not just because we think that reading and writing is really important, so let's test it and let's make sure we're teaching it. It's because it's supposed to free people who for several centuries, at least 4 centuries or more, have not tasted the full freedom that they should have had all along. And we know that reading and writing and math and all those things help people start constructing their own world and deconstructing the world that was made for them, a world that is made with prisons and bars and lines and redlining and deserts that they live in, home ownership desert, education desert, food desert, blah, 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 every kind of desert, whatnot. The only reason that we do it is because we assume subconsciously that it leads to a freedom that they don't have, but we need to stop being subconscious about the freedom part and start being explicit about it. What I'm doing today contributing to the future freedom of this particular human being that I have in my care, whether I'm a teacher, a counselor, a parent, a politician, whoever. The children in my jurisdiction, are they being set up for freedom? If the answer to that is no, then everything's wrong. You're wrong. Your practices are wrong. Your pedagogy is wrong. Me paying you to do what you do is wrong. Me funding you to do what you do is wrong. And by the numbers right now, when we keep saying that it's 1 in 3 possibilities or chances for a Black male to be engaged with the criminal justice system in their lifetime, everything's wrong.
Yeah.
Everything's wrong. I don't care if it's right with your white boys. I don't want to hear about behavioral standards or any of those things until you deal with all the systemic standards, all the systemic kind of ways in which. And teachers, stop thinking of yourself as Mary Poppins or the good guys. You are not the good guys. I'm not the good guy. None of us are the good guys until this is figured out, until it's changed. And we are all possibly complicit in it until it's done and until it's over with. So let's not be children in our own minds about this. Let's be mature and say, I could possibly be playing a part of this. So let me kind of interrogate the way in which I participate and show up in this debate. Sharif, I'll give you the last words on this. I know you said a lot a minute ago that made me just kind of just myself go, on a little bit more, because I think all of this is really important. But the last word for you on the pedagogical side for the teachers who are listening and watching this and are actually kind of struggling a little bit around whether or not they think they're participating in the right side of this or the wrong side of this. I mean, what would be your message to them?
Yeah, I mean, I would start off with right where you left off. Like we have to stop fooling ourselves and being so egotistical that we're thinking that, we are the good guys. The good guys are actually the children and the youth. That's who the good guys are. The rest of us are, we are complicit, either directly or indirectly, in large ways or small ways. And until we build the safe spaces for our Black children and Black youth to be educated, and where it's not a one-off, where it's not this one boutique thing, but it is a whole system. Like, that's the work, and that's what we have to commit to. And may we be successful. That Native American tradition is that our children don't inherit the earth from us; we borrow it from them.
I love that.
We borrowed it from them. And so what are we doing with what we borrowed from our youth? That's why they're the good guys, right? Because we have something that belongs to them, and we are going to return it as sloppy, racist, horrible borrowers, right? Like, that's what we're returning to them. And then the second piece I would just say is just this, we always talk about achievement gap, and it's always attributed to the students. The actual achievement gap is the difference between what adults are able to do, what their mindsets are, and what they're prepared to do or not do for children, particularly for Black children. So the achievement gap in America's schools is actually an adult thing. It is an adult phenomenon. And there's a tremendous chasm between what our children deserve and what we're providing them. And so the achievement gap is actually the mindset gap that ties into all the things that you and the Leadership Caucus, the Black Leadership Caucus talked about.
African American Leadership Forum. For anybody who wants to look it up, the 5 gaps, or shoot me an email and I'll send it to you.
Yeah. So that achievement gap is a big part of that. And then you touched on this a few times, and I just want to, kind of really pin the on the map as far as historically, where adults, particularly white adults, or the Negropeans, as you so funnily, humorously describe them.
Yeah. Who exist.
Who exist and, and multiply in different ways. Right. So the history, if you look at the history of America and enslavement, right, people are like, oh, just a few people actually enslaved people directly. Only a few people owned, so to speak, human beings. Very small percentage overall. Right. But then how was this system nurtured, protected, and advanced if such a small percentage? That means even if they did not own, they bought into the idea, I will support you in establishing this. Instead of resisting it, instead of policing that small percentage that had, they're just like, oh, we want these plantations, or we want to own people, right? So you look at, 30% of the families in the Deep South own slaves. 30%. That's still a lot, right? Like, you know,
that's a lot. That's a third. That's a
third. We're talking about the head of household is one thing, right? And sometimes people mistakenly like say, oh, it's just the head of, no, those whole families. But then that's still 70% who did not own. That 70% could have checked the 30 and said, nah, we ain't doing this. They could have been like what, Thaddeus Stevens, I think, the congressman, right? Yeah. They could have been like Jim Brown. They could have been like, Garrett Morgan or whoever, right? Like, but they said, no, we are going to support. That thread continues, right? Whether it was an overseer, which started and slave patrols or anything else.
In keeping with what we were talking about here today, I mean, what you just said as history and historic fact, Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, in The New Jim Crow, she talks about how there was a racial bargain made with those people who didn't own slaves, but there was a bargain made with them. They
shared something else, right?
Yeah.
What did they share?
Well, the bargain was, we will create whiteness and you will always be a step above at least them.
At least there will be a Negro.
Yes, there will be a permanent benefit to you subscribing to our beliefs. Even if you don't own slaves, you subscribing to whiteness and to a white system, a structure that elevates whiteness above all else, there will be benefits. It will be like having an American Express card, except for it'll be the white card, right? So when they, say, oh, you're playing the race card, or, you had to play the black card or whatnot, listen, the white card actually was established before we, really got our gears going in the United States. So let's just be real about that. But when you think through Michelle Alexander saying that about the criminal justice system, that the white populations that didn't directly own slaves or anything like that still benefited. Well, there's an analogous situation in education to that too, right? So white women who grew up in white suburbs that had houses that were built with the GI Bill in places where there were a covenant that created kind of whiteness citadels, created like whiteness factories, who now wake up one day and feel like, well, I've never owned a slave. My parents weren't racist or whatnot. Your parents grew up in a racism fishbowl, in a fishbowl of racism. Everything I just mentioned in terms of suburbs being built with black money and city money, and freeways being run through black neighborhoods so that they could create boundaries so that whiteness could have a nurturing environment to continue whiteness and grow whiteness and keep you as ignorant as possible about what was happening on the other side of that freeway. You benefited from all of that. And if you don't want to unpack that, fine, but don't teach my kid. Like that, let's just make a deal with each other. If you don't want to unpack reality, because what I just said is history, it's reality. It's not opinion. It's not opinion. It's like the facts are there, whether you want to read them or not. So anyways, I know we have gone on long, and we have like 3 more shows packed into this one show. Yeah, we just did 3 shows.
Listen, I mean, because everywhere you pull, right? Like there's another layer to, to the this wound up ball of yarn. Yeah,
this issue. All right, well, Sharif, I appreciate you as always, man. Thank you for another exciting conversation this week. To the people watching and listening and making comments, thank you too. I appreciate the fact that we can together be interested in something so important as creating and emancipating, creating the situations that emancipate our kids from what I see as like one of our great kind of disappointments, our great embarrassments, which is a system of education that isn't producing free people. Like in a free country with all the resources that we have, we should at least expect that. That's not what's happening. We all have a role in it. Let's do our part. You've been watching The Unpublic with Citizen Stewart and Sharif El-Mekki. This has been another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but at least you are freer now